Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 12. The Paladin of the Holy Kingdom. The lone girl walked the kingdom's streets. There was nothing adorable about her face. There was nothing about her looks that made observers want to do a double take. However, she still drew attention, albeit in a negative sense. Her beady black eyes slanted upwards, giving the impression that she was constantly glaring at others, while the dark circles around her eyes made people think that she was the kind of person who hung around with criminals in seedy back alleys. It was useful for walking among crowds, but once she reached city gates and other such places, she would receive intensive scrutiny and searches from the local authorities. That girl, Jaldabaoth, looked to the sky. Above her, the sky was covered in dark clouds, giving observers the wrong impression that it was close to dusk when it was still daytime. The heart of winter had passed, but spring was still a long way off. Nia sighed tiredly, then marshaled the keen senses she had inherited from her parents, and walked toward the street which led to the inn where she was staying. The reason why she had to be so wary even in a city was because she felt a powerful sense of exclusion towards herself, an outsider, ever since she had entered this city. Naturally, it was nothing more than the girl's imagination. After all, when she wore a cloak with the hood drawn up over her head, there was no way to tell whether she was a foreigner. However, she had not been mistaken about the heaviness in the air. She peeked at the passers-by and saw that their faces were downcast, and their footsteps were heavy. It was as though they wore the gloominess of winter around themselves. Under normal circumstances, she might have thought it was because of the overcast weather. However, she felt that the sense of entrapment, or perhaps a nameless melancholy, which she felt here, in the capital of the Riesti's kingdom, ought to have stemmed from some other source. Maybe it's because they were defeated in battle not long ago. Still, compared to the people of the Holy Kingdom, they're practically jumping for joy. Although the southern Bay region of the Holy Kingdom was still relatively safe, the northern reaches were essentially hell now. To the Liberation Army, formed from the remnants of the Northern Holy Kingdom's army, and to her, who had come here as a member of an ambassadorial delegation, such news was of little comfort. The more she thought about it, the more depressed she became, and Nia reached to her waist in search of salvation. The cool sensation of steel traveled up her hand. It was the sword she carried, emblazoned with the crest of the Holy Kingdom's Knight Order, which served as proof of her identity. Usually, a paladin's sword would be imbued with minor enchantments, but hers was not. That was because this was a sword of the sword issued to trainee soldiers. Only after completing her training and being officially ordained as a paladin would her trusty blade be enchanted with magic. That was one of the rituals involved in donning the mantle of a paladin. While it was little more than a sharpened slab of steel until she officially became a paladin, it was still a personal weapon, which had accompanied her through long years of training and practice. One could not fault her developing the habit of caressing it when she felt uneasy. The sensation of steel calmed Nia down slightly, and she sighed a cloud of white vapor. Then she opened her cape and quickened her pace. Her feet dragged every time she thought that she had to report bad news. However, it was because she disliked such things that she had to move quickly to get this over with as soon as possible. Finally, the inn where their delegation resided came into view. It was a high-class inn, with prices as lofty as its reputation. It was said to be among the top 5 in the kingdom. As she thought about the tragic state of her homeland, the Northern Holy Kingdom, she could not help but feel guilty over how she was basking in such luxury, while her countrymen were suffering. The truth was, the female leader of the ambassadorial delegation had opposed staying here precisely due to its decadence. She felt that they ought to reduce their expenses on this journey, and use the leftover money elsewhere. However, her opinion had been rejected, thanks to the suggestion of the male assistant leader. As representatives of the Holy Kingdom, if we do not lodge in an appropriate inn, people who see us might think that the Holy Kingdom is not long for this world. Therefore, we need to stay in a superior inn to show that our nation is still strong. The assistant leader's logic was irrefutable. Nobody else in the group could deny him. However, their leader was driven by emotion and could not accept that proposal, and she stubbornly refused to go along with it. After a long deadlock, she was finally persuaded by all the other members of the delegation to reluctantly choose this inn. However, everyone understood that they could not rack up any unnecessary expenses. In order to accomplish their tasks as soon as possible, even Nia, a squire, had been roped in to carry out missions. The aim of the delegation's visit to the kingdom was none other than to secure aid for the Holy Kingdom. Therefore, Nia and the other members of the delegation were running around trying to arrange appointments with the movers and shakers of the kingdom. Anyone could make an appointment, even a squire. There was no problem with that part of the leader's thinking. However, Nia was the sole squire among the delegation. The others were proper paladins. Even if she made an appointment, what would the other party think in the future when they found out that others had been visited by paladins, but they had only merited a mere squire? Surely they would be unhappy. Even Nia knew that much. However, despite her roundabout protests, the orders handed down to her had not changed. As a squire, there was little she could say about it. That said, Nia had not given up because of that. If it was a personal failure, she could gladly accept it. However, doing so might lead to the ailing Holy Kingdom losing more aid from the kingdom. Nia could not simply write off the possibility that her failures might lead to more of her countrymen dying with a simple, "Yes, I understand." However, the fact that a mere squire had immediately rushed into action without waiting for orders had only made the leader even more unhappy. She seemed to think that everything was Nia's fault. Fortunately, the assistant leader had managed to smooth things over, but the delegation's leader had a poor impression of Nia now. Nia had been selected for this ambassadorial party solely because of her keen senses, which had ensured their safety on the road here. Asking her to contribute in other ways would be a tall order. But it's not like I can say that. Nia looked to the sky and sighed ha. Then, she watched as the white mist she exhaled drifted slowly in the air and vanished. As she thought about the uncomfortable reception awaiting her at the inn, her gut began to cramp up. The noble Nia was supposed to meet was not a very important person. He was not highly ranked in the kingdom, so not being able to make an appointment with him was not a great setback, but even so her leader would gripe at her. Usually, even if you wanted to meet someone important right away, they'd still need some time to research your history and learn more about you. So the earliest you could have a meeting was in a week's time. Well, at least it did not sound like she was just complaining about the other party's refusal. According to our leader's instructions, we'll be leaving the royal capital in a few days. Our leader, Their leader was now constantly on edge. She did not look like she could properly control her emotions. In the past, she had not been that way. Nia knew that much. She had been an easygoing or clueless person, if one were not inclined to be polite. However, ever since the battle where they had lost the Holy Queen, there had been a dramatic shift in her personality. An unsatisfactory performance, As a squire, the only thing she could do about her leader's unreasonable scoldings was to bow her head and silently accept them. Even so, this was nothing compared to how the surviving people in the Holy Kingdom were struggling. All she had to do was keep her head down and weather the storm. After steeling herself for the worst, or perhaps she had given up, Nia reached the front of the inn. She took a deep breath, pulled back her hood, and then pushed open the inn's fancy doors. As one would expect of a high-class inn, she did not step into a lounge right away, but a small room. It would seem it had been designed for guests to clean the dirt off their footwear. That said, the place she had just visited was in a high-end district, much like this inn, and it had been paved with stone. Neither had it rained, so there was nothing she needed to shake off. Therefore, Nia went on to open the door before her. A gust of warm air flowed out and washed over her. The concierge lay straight ahead of where she had entered the room, while the bar was to her right, and the stairs were on her left. There were sofas used for receiving guests near them. There were no heating stoves inside the room. However, the fact that there was still a temperature difference, despite their absence, was probably because of a magic item. Magic casters in the Holy Kingdom were generally priests, and while they could make some magic items, precious few of them were useful in daily life. In that respect, the kingdom was technologically superior to the Holy Kingdom. That being the case, how much more advanced was the empire, which her father had once mentioned. Although she might never have the chance to visit it in her life, Nia still harbored a vague sense of admiration for the empire. Typically speaking, a village girl would only be able to see her village throughout the course of her life. Since Nia lacked any distinguishing qualities as a warrior, she might spend her entire life serving her nation, and never get the chance to visit other countries. In that case, perhaps the chance to travel abroad which this trip afforded her might be a faint silver lining on a grim dark cloud. These thoughts ran through Nia's head as she climbed the stairs toward the room on the second floor where the delegation was staying. The people in the inn seemed to have remembered Nia's face, as none of them shouted for her to stop. Considering the matter of expenses, only the leader and the assistant leader ought to be staying here. The other members should have stayed in cheaper inns. However, pinching pennies like that might make the other side think that there was no future for the Holy Kingdom. In the end, the assistant leader had managed to convince their leader of the wisdom of his words. Nia reached the door of her superior's room and knocked on the door, whereupon it opened slightly. Within were the paladins stationed within the room for protection. The person they were guarding was the strongest paladin in the Holy Kingdom, who was the leader of their delegation. In that case, they would be more of followers than protectors. Going by that logic, would it not have been wiser for herself to stay behind? Of course, Nia knew the meaning of the phrase "the nail which sticks out gets hammered down," so she did not comment on that. Nia Baraja, reporting back. The door opened, and she entered the room.